Ohio State stays as the number one team in the country. Good win over Illinois on the road by almost 20 points there. An Illinois team that I had inside my top 25, and they took care of business again. Julian Sand looked pretty solid. The running game was also there, not to mention defensively, 3 takeaways, and so you've got to like what the Buckeyes were doing. Really good balanced offensive and defensive showing. They stay at 1. In the same place, Alabama stays at number 2. They beat Missouri, and 27-24, a close win. They get a late turnover of Bo Pribula to win the game there, and all of a sudden the Crimson Tide, and this is where you've got to be careful. Again, it's more of a week-to-week sport now in college football. The rosters aren't as deep, the talent's more spread out. Alabama, they do lose by 14 on the road at FSU in week 1, but how about this the last 3 weeks? A win at number 5 Georgia by 3, beating Vanderbilt by 16, the number 16 team, and then going on the road to beat number 14 Missouri. All those ratings, of course, in the AP, but you get the point. The Crimson Tide looking strong, they're number 2. Well, Miami, a weird scheduling spot. They were on bye again after a bye before the Florida State game, so they're now going to play a full schedule from here on out, but I keep them going up 1 spot. Georgia moves up 1 spot too. They were not on bye and got a kind of a weird win at Auburn, but at the end of the day, that was a good Tigers team that has some losses, but they've played a lot of the best teams in the nation. So for Georgia to go in there and get out of a defensive struggle with a 10-point win was good. Texas A&M up 3 spots. They dominate Florida, and a lot of people will be down on the Gators, but like Auburn, they played a lot of the best teams in the nation. Texas A&M also now 6-0, and defensively they look strong in that game, holding Florida after 14 points in the first quarter to just 3 the rest of the game. And you've got to like the Aggies now too. They held Florida to 17, 9 for Mississippi State, only 10 to Auburn, and after that showing against Notre Dame, they bounced back defensively, but also can win the shootout against the best teams, one of the best teams in the nation, Notre Dame, so you got to like where they're at. Indiana up 3 spots, and the best jump in the nation to me, because this was an Indiana team that a lot of people thought was fluky from last year. They had a weaker schedule last year in the Big Ten. They got to the playoff, but then got blown out, and also this took me some deep thought because I thought about that game against Notre Dame, but I'm still giving Indiana the benefit of the doubt, giving them the benefit of this being a new year, new team like Notre Dame has shown, being below them. But Indiana, you go into Autzen Stadium and to win by 10 against this Oregon team that has crushed some opponents and obviously had a big win at Penn State. Just can't say enough about what that is for Kirk Cignetti and the great job he's done. Notre Dame up no spots, but they stay at 7 and looked every bit solid against NC State. They're on a little bit of a run here, and after, losing those first couple of games, they've certainly turned things around. Also, CJ Carr looked very impressive with 342 yards in the air and 2 touchdowns. Oregon down 5 spots, and they stick in at 8, and this is where, again, you got to be careful. It's a week-to-week sport. Even though Oregon does lose this game to Indiana, and by 10 points was kind of not what you expected at home, it is a week-to-week sport. This team is still certainly capable of winning the national title. You just got to punish them a little bit for losing, but I'm sure they'll be back. Texas Tech up 1 spot. They get a sound win over Kansas, and they certainly look like the best team of the Big 12, now 6-0. Another 42-point showing, and that'll be a really fun team to watch and can definitely wipe out some people in the playoffs. Southern California jumps 2 spots. They really handle Michigan at home, and what you have to like if you're a USC fan is holding the Wolverines to only 13 points because obviously the offense has been less of the problem for the most part. Mississippi down 5 spots in a really weird win. Yes, they do win, but against Washington State, where they were 32.5-point favorites, a near upset, they win by just 3 points, and obviously a bad spot for Mississippi, but still only to win by 3, just not that impressive, and with some of these other teams in front of them doing good showings, I had to move them down. LSU also down 1 spot. They did win against South Carolina, but a 10-point home win, and the defense again strong. Kind of a similar game to the Missouri Tigers, who are close to them in terms of strength at LSU. They beat South Carolina at home by about 9, so I mean, that's where LSU is, very close in these next few rankings. They stay at 12. Texas up 1 spot. They get a nice win over Oklahoma, and just as I talked about the week-to-week, funny you see in the AP that Texas gets knocked out of the top 25, but I said be careful because now you're going to look weird having to shove them all the way back in. Well, they dominate Oklahoma, who was rated all the way at 6 in the AP. I had them down there for the John Mateer injury, and I'm not sure he should have even come back because he did not look good. 3 turnovers there, and that was finally the Texas defense that you wanted to see, where they really dominated an opponent. And also, I think the way Texas needs to play to keep Arch Manning from any dangerous spot, hold the lead, and let that defense go to work, and he can definitely play fine. Utah up 5 spots, and the Utes get a good win against Arizona State. Now, for the Sun Devils, a little tough because their quarterback was hurt, but even then, that really didn't excuse losing by 32 points. That was a dominant showing by Utah, and I think they're starting to enter in as another player in the Big 12 alongside Texas Tech. But of course, the Red Raiders have to be above the Utes for that big win they had against them earlier in the season. Tennessee down 4 spots, and the Volunteers win 34-31 over Arkansas. And talking about a weird situation like Ole Miss, you're playing a team with a fired head coach, but they only won by 3, not as impressive of a home win, and so they do get knocked down for that, almost as much as a loss in my opinion. But the Volunteers still have a good shot to get to the playoff and everything. Missouri, I didn't know what to do with this team. They were expected to lose by about a field goal to Alabama, and that's exactly what happened. It's also hard to rate Missouri because they haven't even left the Show Me State yet. They have not even had a road game. They've been literally at Faurot Field the entire time. But honestly, a pretty good loss considering Alabama I have all the way at 2, so I'm not going to punish them too much. I think Missouri can still make some noise coming down in the SEC. Georgia Tech moves up 5 spots, and this Yellow Jackets team, a 35-20 winner over Virginia Tech, also about what they're expected to win by, but definitely a nice story going on there. You've got some experience, got returning production on that team that has really helped them out. The coach also seems to know what he's doing, and honestly, this is a team that I have projecting upwards in the years to come just because I talked about the potential there, that you've got a good recruiting state. If you can get some money behind the program, you could really make some noise, and it just seems like you have great potential being in Atlanta to eventually do something. Also, the weaker ACC, if you can ride that schedule, you can be in consistent contention for a playoff. So how about Georgia Tech 6-0? Oklahoma, I didn't know what to do with them because obviously if they had John Mateer, I was going to rate them a little bit higher than this, but since they didn't going into this game, I had them about 18, and then Mateer plays terrible and probably made the Sooners look worse than they really should have been because they had so many turnovers. So it's like maybe he shouldn't have returned, and then in that situation, of course, Texas would have been the better team anyways. It was almost like he was a negative, but I don't know what to do with the Sooners. It's just kind of a weird situation in that rivalry game, so I'll keep them at 18. Washington up 5 spots, and they win that Friday game against Rutgers 38-19. They get to come back home and face the same situation they were in last week. Cross-country travel, Rutgers didn't look that great there. They're also 0-3 in conference play, but how about Damon Williams with 402 yards, a career high there in passing and rushing, and Washington looking pretty good in the Big Ten. Brigham Young stays at the same spot, number 20, and a nice overtime win, actually 2 overtimes on the road at Arizona. A pretty decent team this year, so honestly, all things considered, that was a tough game for BYU and the Cougars, but they end up getting it done. They're now 6-0, another interesting story in the Big 12. Perhaps they can make some noise, and they'll definitely have a shot to win the conference. Michigan down 4 spots. They lose on the road there at USC. They're at 21, and with Michigan, it's just, I think the struggle bus here for them is getting the passing game going. You've got a young quarterback. Not only that, they really lean into the run game, and maybe more than you would like if you're looking for a well-rounded football team, and always tough to stop USC when you go out there, so you kind of needed to get into a shootout, and Michigan just can't really do that right now. Iowa jumps into the ratings, and they're at 22. They were not rated last week, but I just thought it was really impressive the way they pummeled Wisconsin, did not give up one single point, and offensively wasn't too bad either, so the Hawkeyes jump into the ratings. We'll see if they climb. Vanderbilt also up 2 spots from 25. They didn't actually play, but because of the movement in front, behind, and everything, they jump up 2. Illinois down 3. They did have quite a loss to Ohio State, but honestly, with the turnovers factored in and everything, and that might regress a little bit, plus the fact they're playing the number 1 team in my ratings, Ohio State, hard to punish them a ton, although they're hanging on to a spot. And Nebraska, I will give the benefit of the doubt for the final spot out of the Big Ten. They are now 5-1. They beat a pretty good Maryland team wide on the bubble at one point, but it was harder to put Nebraska in earlier on in the season because they do have a lot of close wins, but no like massive blowout of a good team or something that really has you trying to force them into the top 25. Our drop teams are Penn State. They go all the way from 15 to out of the ratings, and just to talk about that in a moment, wow, what a turnaround here for Penn State. James Franklin now fired. Hard to believe anybody had that on the bingo card coming into the year. I thought Penn State would actually be the national title runner-up, but instead they're now 3-3 after week 7, and they're down a head coach, and so it is definitely all the wheels falling off. Plus, even then, you guys know I try to factor in really significant injuries and stuff like that, and they've now lost Drew Aller, so he's gone. So really going to be hard for Penn State to jump back into the top 25. And Arizona State, with that big loss on the road at Utah from 23, they're jumped out. Our new teams are Iowa and Nebraska, both out of the Big Ten, and the bubble teams are Clemson, Louisville, Cincinnati, Virginia, Pittsburgh, and Penn State. And with Clemson, I think maybe like we'll see Penn State later in the year, just too much talent to really stumble for that long. We were all scratching our heads at what's going on. Felt like the Tigers should have been definitely a consensus top 25 team all year. year, and I think they're starting to get that flow a little bit. Nice little winning streak, a nice easier part of the schedule for them to pummel some of these teams, and they do blow out Boston College, so they'll probably jump back in the top 25 soon if they keep winning like this. Louisville I also have on the bubble. If they put up a really good showing at Miami, maybe they jump in. Cincinnati also starting to make some noise in the Big 12, and they have a good record. They beat some teams. Virginia in the ACC, they beat Louisville, so depending on what they do, they could jump Louisville and jump into the top 25 too. Pittsburgh also a decent team to watch. They just had a good win at Florida State. And then Penn State, kind of like I was talking about with some of these teams that were not the highest pick after some big losses, like maybe Oregon won't be next week, or Penn State now, or Texas last week and everything like that. Just so much talent, it feels hard for them not to succeed at some point, so I'll keep them on the bubble. These are my top 25 teams in college football after week 7. Drop some comments and a like down below if you have any thoughts. Feel free to subscribe if you like content like this. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video.